Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my ridiculous tenant Karen vandalized my house and refused to pay rent. She turned my property into an unlivable hellhole, ended up assaulting me and calling the cops on me. Here is what happened. About 6 years ago, I inherited a property from my late father. He lived only about 15 minutes away from me, and I already owned a house of my own. The market was horrible, so I made the decision to file the paperwork and be able to rent it out. Now, the woman who I rented it to seemed perfectly normal for the first 4 years or so. What I did not know at the time was that she was a complete Karen, and maybe becoming a landlord was a bad idea after all. Now, at the 4-year mark, I started getting complaints and repair requests from her. Before you go crazy down in the chat about it being my responsibility, I fully agree that if something breaks, I'm the one that needs to take care of it. When I got a text about the water heater breaking down, I spent the money to get it replaced and working again. Then a week later, I got a text that the refrigerator broke, and again I got it replaced. After that, I was getting at least one text a month about something being broken and needing repairs. It was starting to get fishy because some of the broken things were suspicious. For one, a broken window that she claimed broke during a storm, but I could see that the glass was outside the house and it was broken from the inside. I had a suspicion that she was the one damaging the house and getting me to replace everything. You might wonder what she would gain from those actions aside from just a sick thrill. And well, she started refusing to pay rent every time something broke, and from year 4 to 5, I got maybe half of my rent every single month if I was lucky. On paper, she would have won, since if something is broken, she can refuse rent during that time. Then year number 5 started and she was getting a little too cocky with her actions. She was breaking things and I started getting professionals to go in and find a cause for the damage. They started telling me that it was clearly intentional damage. Because of that professional claim, I was no longer obligated to repair and she could not withhold rent because of it. I told her as much and she started freaking out and claiming I was trying to scam her and that she needed me to fix the things she damaged. I was done with this game and told her flat out that she had to pay me rent or I was gonna call the sheriff and get her evicted. During that year, she paid often enough to avoid getting evicted, but things came to a head when I went to the property to see yet another complaint she filed. At this point, I had not been in the house for 7 months. I walked in and saw the entire place was destroyed. I'm talking holes in the walls, paint all over the walls, the carpet was soaking wet and I did not want to even know what liquid it was. Some carpet had been ripped out, cabinet doors were missing, and everything else you could think of. I sent her a text telling her that she needed to come by and speak to me about the property. A couple days later we were standing on my porch. Karen, what did you want? Me, I went by the house to check on the piping you said was broken. The entire place is destroyed and you have not paid rent now in over 2 months. Karen, yeah, I will get you the rent when you fix the pipes. Me, I'm not playing this game with you anymore. I kept telling you that I was gonna evict you if you pushed me too far, and now you have. I'm giving you warning to start packing your things because as soon as we are done here, I'm calling and filing for your eviction. Karen, you cannot evict me. I'm a tenant and you're the one responsible for keeping the place in a livable condition. Me, not when you're the one trashing it. I'm done with all of this. Also, if the place still looks like that after you move out, I'm within my rights to keep your security deposit. Karen did not like hearing any of this and decided to slap me hard across the face. She was wound up to hit me again, so I grabbed her arms and pushed her away from me. She ended up going backwards over the porch and landing on her butt on the grass. She was not hurt but started wailing that she was calling the police for assault. I could hear her side of the conversation where she told them that her landlord asked her to come over and then just started attacking her. That I went crazy and she needed help because I was starting to come after her again. The police rushed over and despite standing up after the call, she went back to the ground when she heard them coming. Like she was hurt and couldn't get up. The police were buying her story, but before they could arrest me, I asked them if they would be willing to look at my doorbell cam footage first. They agreed despite Karen yelling at them not to and to just arrest me already. They saw the entire thing and that I was just defending myself. They also saw her getting up after the phone call to the police to yell at me more and then faking when they arrived. I was not getting charged, but you can be sure I wanted to press charges against her for attacking me. She was trying to boss the police around to avoid getting arrested, but she was not able to. After they left, I called for her eviction notice and got the ball rolling on that one. Now to skip a couple of weeks too, when there was a conclusion of both things. First of all, the eviction was cut and dry, with the sheriff office visiting the property, seeing the damage she caused, seeing the prior issues with her, and then seeing that I was not getting my rent. After she didn't get rid of her stuff, they threw it all out on the street and put a padlock on the door until I could get the locks changed out for new ones. For the assault, I figured she was gonna get some kind of warning to not hit people. Instead, I learned that she had prior violent offenses. She had a record, and that alone was enough for them to put her behind bars. Like I had given her chances, so had the court, and they were also tired of dealing with her crap. It turns out all those times trying to keep her rent money was in order to pay a lawyer for her other arrests. As for the house, I decided to give up being a landlord in fear of getting another Karen living at the house. It was gonna cost me a fortune to fix the place back up, but when I finish, I just plan to sell it off. Also, to save myself the hassle of it all and accept that I was not made for this life. The only other exciting moment was when I met Karen's sister, who I feel like can also be named Karen. She had to come and pick up her stuff and started verbally attacking me for kicking a poor innocent woman out on the streets. She left, but not before a vague threat of keeping an eye on my house because she now knew where it was. So far, nothing has come of that, but if it does, I'll be sure to edit the post and include a continuation. And here, Ripe Stars, I would very much appreciate it if you could like the video and maybe even post a comment if you enjoyed the story. Thank you so much. The next revenge story starts like this. Last year, one of my 40 female partners, 47 male relatives first got very sick and then died. While he was in the hospital for several months, we regularly dropped by to look after his house, fix the garden, make sure nothing was amiss and such. Now, one of the neighbors is a real consolation prize. As she does not like to garden, she had the garden front and back of the property she has rented filled up with gravel. I think it's stupid and ugly, but as long as she is happy, more power to her in her garden. Said neighbor started pestering my partner and me about things she wanted changed in the relative's garden, bushes cut off, plants removed, that kind of stuff. She also claimed that the way we were gardening was attracting harmful bugs, which when I showed them to a friendly biologist were confirmed to be wood sorrel seeds. Anyway, I talked everything through with her to confirm what needed doing and removed any plants that were threatening to intrude into her garden, like ivy, blackberry, etc. The only thing I did not cut was one hazel branch, as it was in the middle of a dry spell. Cutting them is bad for the plant, and we were planning to relocate the bush anyway. I explained this to her and asked if she could wait until spring. She said it was fine and let me get back to gardening. The next time I dropped by, someone had hacked the branch in question off at the widest area near the base, splintering and at a weird angle. To be clear, legally she was allowed to cut anything growing over her property back, and the branch was approximately 10 centimeters across the border. I'm just really annoyed that she said it was fine to wait and then hacked at the plant the moment we were not looking. But as my partner's family was worried about the relative, I decided to let it slip and kept taking care of the garden. By now we have cut and relocated the hazel as promised. There was an empty spot in the middle of the relative's front yard, maybe 6 by 4 feet, and I decided to put some regionally native mint there. In case you don't know, mint is a very useful plant. Insects like it, you can make it into tea, it smells delicious and keeps mosquitoes away, and it is unstoppable. I know though it will spread into the neighbor's yard and mess up her peaceful gravel paradise, and it is all but impossible to get rid of. It spreads along underground root tendrils. My father thinks this is hilarious, and obviously I got my petty qualities from him. My partner on the other hand thinks I may have been unnecessarily mean. The family plans to sell the property, so by the time this problem becomes obvious we will be long gone. I have also ordered a bee-friendly mix to freshen up the grass in the backyard, as she complained the grass was too high growing and we had to rake out most of it. Cannot sell a house with a bare dirt backyard, right? And the next one is another revenge story. So when I was 13, I was really into snowboarding, so every chance I got, I was out doing that in winter. Though in recent years I could do so in July. There was one huge hill that was open to everyone all year long, so as long as they didn't cut trees or wreck the place. This hill was located on a plot of land in the woods that, a few months prior to this event, had gone from being for sale to bought by my uncles to keep it from being bulldozed. Nobody really knew these men were my uncles because because we all have different last names and my dad's family is huge. That comes up again later. One of the parents said that myself and anybody who was not a baby in a sled had no right to be there, as we were too big and violent to be using that hill and generally let the kids steal or otherwise damage the boards and skis or do things to drive everyone else away. I largely did not care because when I went there I just used my cheap $10 board that was built about as well as a plastic sled, so I didn't have to carry my bigger and better one across town. That, as you can imagine, pissed these Karens off even more. I never really understood why they were so butthurt over it. They could take their kids sledding anywhere, and there were even public roads that were shut down in winter because they were too dangerous to drive on that people used all the time as sled spots. They were also much closer to home and safer because no tree line to collide with, fallen logs, or chances of coyotes deciding their kids were snacks. After about a week of them constantly nagging and witching, I finally said, "Look, you can sled anywhere you want. Me? Because some a-hole decided to wreck property and trespass, I cannot even snowboard on my own property because the neighbors complain that I might break their fence. So unless I want to pay hundreds of dollars to go to some fancy resort, this is the only place I can snowboard. On a plot of land half a mile wide, I'm fairly certain that we can all enjoy it." I did not wait for a response. I just went on down the hill, swerving to avoid all the kids who think laying down in the middle of a place everyone is skiing, snowboarding or sledding is a good idea, and thought that would be it. But as you can guess, I was wrong. I was never the best at stopping, so I stopped when I hit the trees, and thankfully they were still rather bendy. Over the sounds of laughter and snow being shredded, I heard the Karen screaming and turned to see her at the top of the hill, pointing at me and calling me every name in the book. Apparently, she called her husband, who confirmed they lived nearby, and said that number 1, I had threatened her, and number 2, I had called her everything in the book, and number 3, I was a grown adult. At 13, I was maybe 3'9" and looked like I was 10. Her husband had to fight laughter when he saw me stomping back up the hill, wearing a hot pink Barbie snowsuit and carrying a cheap Monster Energy /black with electric green board under my arm. He asked what I had said. I repeated it and admitted I knew cursing was wrong, but expressed how annoyed I was. He tried to calm his wife, but she screamed more and said, "I'm calling the landowners." And I smiled like the Cheshire Cat and told her, "Go right ahead. I will speak to them too." So she did, and she launched into a huge rant, very animated with lots of flailing and hoping, similar to an angry hen. Finally, when she starts losing steam, I can hear one of my uncles saying, "I'll be right there, sit tight." The crappy smile that spread across her face when she heard that, she sneered at me and said, "I'm going to get you in so much trouble." Her husband had gathered the kids and told them to wait in the truck by then. He looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and die of embarrassment. After about 15 minutes, a truck pulled up and out hopped my uncle. They came over and spoke to the woman, and I could tell they didn't 100% believe her, but because this was their land, if anything happened, they would be on the hook for it. She got loud and again demanded that I be banned for life and all that. They looked around and asked her to point to the dangerous and disrespectful woman, as clearly I was the only one snowboarding that day. She huffed and grabbed me, giving me a shake as she shouted, "This Karen here," despite it being the middle of January. I swear I heard crickets as the wheels in their heads turned. Knowing these men and how much like their own kid they saw me, it was mostly to keep from yeeting this woman into the sun. Finally, one of them spoke. "You mean our niece?" Karen sputtered and tried to come up with some sort of response, but failed miserably. My uncles then gave her the choice: leave now and come back in a couple of days. They would drive by to make sure she stayed away, or continue acting how she was and they would press charges on her to have her banned and charged with assault for grabbing me, as well as being on the hook for any damages her kids caused to anybody's gear. Apparently they had been getting calls, but nobody knew her name, so the cops couldn't do anything. She huffed and stormed off, and her husband following and looking like a beat dog. She never did come back. And the next one is a story from r/am I the a-hole. So I am 35 and child-free. My sister is 33 and a mother of 3 kids between 6 to 10 years of age, 2 boys and a girl. I have always had a strained relationship with my sister and usually avoid being around her kids, as I don't really like kids in general. Yesterday, my sister came over unannounced with her kids. She told me her brother-in-law had met with an accident and she and her hubby needed to go see him in the hospital. She said she needed me to watch her kids for the evening, as our parents are out of town. I told her to get a babysitter, but she said she couldn't get one on such short notice. I refused again, telling her I had never babysat before and was looking forward to a quiet evening. First she told me she was just leaving them there. I told her I would call a child welfare committee and would report her for abandonment if she pulled something like that. She begged and pleaded and actually began to fake cry. As I did not want to provide my neighbors with entertainment, I reluctantly agreed. At first things were fine, the kids were a bit rambunctious but still somewhat tolerable. They ate their dinner without starting a food fight, and then I left them in the living room to watch a movie. I was in the study getting some work done. I had brought my cat and dogs in there with me as I wanted to keep them safe from the kids. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash. I rushed to the living room and found my precious antique clock that I kept on the mantelpiece on the ground in pieces. It was worth well over $1,000 in USD. I'm not American. I was furious, of course, and asked how the hell this happened. The eldest kid incoherently explained that they had taken it down to look at it, and then the younger two were fighting over it and dropped it. Cue ear-shattering wailing from the other two, blaming one another for the demise of my prized possession. I had enough at this point. I called my brother-in-law and told him to come over immediately and get his spawn out of my home. He asked what was wrong, and I told him what they had done. He had the gall to tell me that I was overreacting. One of the kids, I think the youngest, had started bawling now. I told my brother-in-law to come at once and get his kids. He said he was on his way. He came to get the kids but did not leave before lecturing me on the importance of family. I told him to get lost. This morning I received angry texts and phone calls from my parents and several relatives asking how I could be so heartless and how I could value a clock more than my niece and nephews. I've told them I don't care what they think because the way I see it I was completely within my rights and kicking them out. They should just be grateful that I've decided not to make my sister and brother-in-law pay for it. Judging from the fact that they have 3 kids, they probably cannot afford it. I want to know what Reddit thinks. Am I the a-hole here, or are they? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. We also have a small update and it reads, after much consideration, I've decided to sue. That clock was rare and expensive. Comment number 1, you are the a-hole. They had to see a family member in the hospital. I get being child-free, but I hate it when people start making it a personality trait. All you had to do was watch them. It's basic knowledge not to leave kids unsupervised and you are surprised that something got broken. Comment number 2, you are the a-hole. First off, you sound like a pretentious a-hole, especially by your comments about your sister's financial state and kids. Not to mention, she told you she had an emergency and that a family member was in an accident and she had to beg you to watch them for a short while. Really? You were their last option here. Second, you left 3 children between the ages of 6 and 10 unsupervised in your house. You literally holed yourself up in another room with your pets to avoid them. You did not talk to them about house rules or anything. You're just as much at fault here as the kids. The next one is titled, Don't Mess with a Grandma. It is a long one, but I love that moment of my life so much. I hope you will like it too. I was in a 7-year-long relationship with my partner. We lived together. I thought we loved each other. We were engaged. The wedding was mostly organized. We were doing great. He brought me flowers and we spent a lot of time together. So, when his parents suggested that we move in with them to save some money before the wedding to buy our own apartment, I agreed. But I had a serious conversation with my significant other. I told him that for me, a very independent person, moving into his home, his family, with completely different traditions and values than those I was used to, was a big step. I asked him to consider if he was absolutely and completely sure of us and our relationship, because if he has any doubts, I would rather stay on our own. A few months with his family can be stressful, conflicts may arise, and if something were to affect our relations, I would be left alone in his house with his family after every quarrel among us. And that would be really difficult for me. He hugged me, kissed me, lifted me on his arms and assured me that I absolutely don't have to worry about anything. Well, there would be no revenge story if everything turned out well. A few days after moving, my dear boy started disappearing for whole nights. He claimed to be seeing his childhood friends, drinking beer and playing video games. He did not answer his phone, he came home in the mornings, this has never happened before, and we started arguing. One time I left the house after such an argument and went to my beloved grandma to calm down and complain to someone close to me. After I got back, I sat down with him calmly and said that I did not mind him seeing his buddies, that it was never a problem in our relationship, it always happened, he went out alone or I went out alone, but we always had contact with each other. We let ourselves know what time we would be home, we were picking up phone calls, and that we are to get married soon. We cannot start a marriage this way, that I'm only asking for honesty and contact with me. And I got the truth. He told me that he was actually seeing his adult student and that she lives in the same neighborhood as his parents. So he could not be with her that easily when we lived far away, and that now that they've spent more time together, he knows that he wants to marry her. And I can pack my bags and move out. I ran out of breath. He just turned and walked away. He went to work, leaving me alone at his house with this news. I realized he was manipulating me all the time. That for a long time he had no intention of continuing our relationship, but he did not want to move in with his parents alone as an adult man. His parents probably would not have agreed to that, so the whole situation was just to make it more comfortable for him to continue his affair and make sure without consequences. I packed up and ran away to my grandma. I had no one else. I was devastated. I started going to therapy. I threw myself into my work in order not to think and not to feel. It was a terrible time. However, it was going to get worse. He paid off my share of costs for organizing the wedding, but he used it all. The space I chose, the band that was supposed to play for us, flowers, menu, and a date. When I found out about it, I broke down again. Friends supported me as best as they could. My grandma was surprisingly calm, and you must know that she is an incredibly tough woman. One of the first women in my country to hold a high and very masculine position. A woman that has balls larger than 100 guys. And a sense of humor. When the wedding date came, my grandma told me to go get some wine with my friends, have a mega party and not think about it at all. I cried for days then, so she forced me out of the house. She forbade me to be alone. She said she had a doctor that day and could not be with me all the time. So I must go. Have fun. Soon during the party, which I finally decided to go to, I started getting some messages from mutual friends. Something was happening and it had something to do with my grandma. So I called her and asked, "What did you do?" And she replied with a smile that she went to the church where my ex was getting married. "What?" I shouted. "Well," says grandma, "did you think that I would just let him get away with it?" I took a few deep breaths, silenced my friends, turned on the loudspeaker so that everyone could hear and said, "Tell me." "Well, I went to church. After all, no one from his family knows me there, and the church is a public place." I sat down, the poor little old lady in the front row, and began to pray feverishly. No one in his family had the heart to throw me out of there. And he, as a groom, was getting ready elsewhere. He only saw me when he stood under the altar, and then it was too late. Even if he pulled me out by force, I would lay down on the ground and start to cry. But he of course didn't. He knows me well and he knew what I am capable of. So well, he was standing there sweating more and more, and I was smiling at him widely. Up until the priest asked if anyone knew the reason why these two should not get married. "Come on, don't tell me you stopped the wedding," I asked, totally shocked. No, I did not want to do this to the girl. I'm always on the side of women, you know that. But it was enough that he did not know that. So at this exact point of the ceremony, I moved slightly, as if I wanted to get up, and he almost pooped himself. I thought he was going to pass out. He stuttered till the end of the ceremony and sweat was pouring down his forehead like crazy, because he didn't know what else I can come up with. He had barely stammered that he wanted to marry her. And after the ceremony, I stuck my tongue out at him, smiled and left without any of the guests noticing anything. At this point, me and my friends were rolling on the floor laughing. As soon as I could catch my breath, I asked, "But why did you do all this?" And she said, "Because you will never have good memories of that day. So I wanted to leave him with the bitter taste and knowledge that if you act like an a-hole, you might have a suit full of crap out of your own guilt and fear. I call it justice." Oh, how I love my grandma. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would agree, that is probably one of the best grandma revenge stories we have ever read. You simply don't mess with grandmas, and in this case, their granddaughters. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.